The canyon was quiet now, but the silence was heavy, like the hush after a storm that had torn apart the land. The Apache leaned against the stone wall, blood soaking his arm and streaking down his side. His breaths came deep and steady, though Mary could see the effort it took to remain upright. She knelt before him, her hands shaking as she pressed her shawl firmly against his wound. "You'll bleed too much if I don't stop it," she whispered desperately. His eyes flickered down to her, dark and unwavering. "I have known worse," he murmured. "This is not the wound that kills me." Tears stung her eyes. "But it could. You nearly died protecting me." He was silent a long moment, his gaze fixed on the canyon floor far below, where the bodies of hunters lay scattered like broken dolls. Finally he said, "I chose this fight. Apache do not run when wolves come." Mary's chest tightened. His strength, his fierce courage, it humbled her. She had spent her life believing survival meant fleeing danger, avoiding risk. But he stood unyielding, ready to pay with his life if need be. She tied the shawl as tightly as she could, forcing the bleeding to slow. "There," she whispered. "It should hold for now." The Apache gave a small nod, then his eyes met hers, steady as stone. "Now you must choose." Her breath caught. "Choose?" He shifted, his voice low, deliberate. "The way back is open. You can go. Hunters dead, trail broken. You return to your people, to your world, or—" He paused, the firelight of the fading sun casting his face in shadow. "Or you stay. With me." Mary's heart lurched. She stared at him, her mind tumbling through memories of the chase, of fear, of the sanctuary in the cave, of the promise she had made. She thought of the way he had shielded her, fought for her, demanded only truth when he could have demanded her life. But beyond that, she thought of her world, the town where corruption festered, where her words would be doubted, her testimony against powerful men silenced. Even if she returned, could she ever truly be safe? Could she even keep her promise when so many would refuse to listen? Her throat tightened. "If I go back, I don't know if I'll survive. They'll send more hunters." The Apache's eyes never wavered. "If you stay, you live by Apache ways. Hard life, no easy bread, no soft bed. But you live free." Mary's chest rose and fell, torn between fear and a strange, powerful pull toward him. She had never imagined a life beyond the one she had known, yet here she stood, offered not just survival but a choice. She met his gaze, her voice trembling. "And if I stay, will you want me here?" For a moment, silence hung between them. Then his hand, rough and scarred, reached to brush her cheek with surprising gentleness. "You already are here," he said softly. Her heart swelled, tears slipping down her cheeks. She realized then that the choice was no choice at all. She could not walk away, not after what they had endured, not after the bond forged in fire and blood. Mary closed her eyes, whispered a trembling prayer, and chose. The days that followed were unlike any Mary had ever known. The Apache, though still wounded, led her deeper into the canyons, away from the trails of hunters and settlers alike. They traveled to a hidden valley, where water ran fresh from a spring and the land stretched wide with sage and mesquite. It was a place untouched by white men, a sanctuary known only to his people. Here, Mary tended his wounds, learning the use of herbs he showed her, grinding roots into poultices and binding them with strips of leather. She had never been a healer, yet under his guidance her hands grew sure, steady. Nights were spent by the fire where he spoke more than before. He told her stories, not only of war, but of hunts, of seasons, of the spirits that walked the land. His words painted pictures of a world she had never seen, one alive with meaning where every stone and stream had its place. Mary listened, her heart opening with each tale. The more she learned, the more she understood. The price he had demanded of her was not only a promise but transformation. She would never again see the world as she once had. One evening, beneath a sky ablaze with stars, Mary turned to him, her voice trembling. "I thought the price you asked of me was a burden, but now I see. It was a gift." The Apache regarded her quietly, the firelight flickering in his eyes. "Truth is never burden," he said. "Only those who fear it." "Think so?" She reached for his hand, her fingers curling around his calloused palm. For a moment he seemed surprised, then he closed his hand over hers, steady and strong. In that silence, words were no longer needed. The bond between them had grown beyond bargains or promises. It had become something deeper. Trust, respect, and the stirring of love neither had expected. Mary knew her life would never return to what it once was. The world of towns and farms and parlors had vanished from her path. In its place stood the wild, the vast unknown, and the man who had hidden her not only from hunters, but from the smallness of her old life, and she accepted it, not as loss, but as freedom. The hunters never returned. Perhaps they believed her dead, or perhaps fear of the Apache's wrath kept them at bay. Whatever the reason, Mary no longer looked over her shoulder. Her place was here, in the land that had nearly swallowed her, but instead had given her a new beginning. One night, as the fire crackled and the stars wheeled overhead, the Apache drew her close. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "The price has been paid." Mary pressed her forehead to his chest, tears filling her eyes. "Yes," she whispered, "and it was worth everything." And in that moment she knew. Love had not been the price at all. It was the reward. The cave was quiet except for the fire's soft crackle. Outside, the desert winds hissed, carrying faint echoes of coyotes and distant owls. Mary sat near the flames, her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. Across from her, the Apache sat cross-legged, his gaze fixed on the fire as though seeing visions in the embers. Her heart still raced whenever silence lingered too long between them. She felt as though she balanced on a knife's edge, grateful for his protection, yet fearful of the mystery that clung to him. Finally, unable to contain herself, she asked softly, "You never told me what the price truly is. What you want of me." His eyes lifted from the fire, locking onto hers. They were dark and piercing, yet not cruel. "I told you already," he said. "Truth. Promise." Mary shook her head faintly. "But why? You could have asked for anything. My service, my labor, even my freedom. Why ask only for truth?" The Apache leaned forward, his expression hardening. "Because your people kill us with lies more than guns. They call us savages. They say we steal, that we have no law, no spirit. Lies travel faster than bullets. They cut deeper than blades." Mary's breath caught. She had heard such words in her town. The casual slurs, the mocking tones when settlers spoke of Apaches and other tribes. She had never thought much of it, never questioned whether those words carried poison. He continued, his voice low and steady. "If you live, if you return, you carry my people's story. You speak truth. You tell your kind that Apache are men, hunters, fathers, sons, not animals." His words struck her like arrows, piercing the veil of ignorance she had carried all her life. She lowered her gaze, ashamed. "I never knew." "You did not want to know," he said firmly, though not unkindly. "But now you will." Tears welled in Mary's eyes. For so long she had thought herself innocent in the struggles of the frontier. Yet here, in this cave, she realized her silence had made her complicit in the lies that had stained his people. "I promise," she whispered, her voice trembling. "If I survive, I'll tell the truth. I'll speak it no matter who tries to silence me." The Apache studied her a long moment as though measuring the weight of her words. At last he nodded. "Then price is paid." Mary blinked in surprise. "That's all? Truly?" His lips curved in the faintest shadow of a smile, an expression so fleeting she wondered if she imagined it. For now. Relief washed over her, mingled with something else she could not name. Gratitude, perhaps, or a growing respect for this man who had chosen not to take, but to ask. She lay down by the fire, her heart lighter than it had been in days. And though danger still prowled beyond the cave, she closed her eyes with the strange comfort of knowing the price had been revealed. Not a debt of flesh or coin, but a duty of truth that might shape her future. The next day dawned with an uneasy stillness. The Apache woke Mary with a quiet shake of his hand. His expression was tense, his eyes scanning the cave entrance. "What is it?" she whispered, her throat dry. "They are close," he replied. His voice was calm, but edged with steel. Her heart lurched. "The hunters?" He gave a single nod. Mary scrambled to her feet, panic rushing through her veins. "But how? We were safe here, weren't we?" "No place safe forever," he said firmly. "Wolves never stop hunting until they eat." Even as he spoke, the sound of distant voices drifted through the canyon, growing louder with each breath. The hunters had found their trail again. The Apache moved swiftly, gathering his bow and quiver, adjusting the knife at his side. His motions were precise, honed by years of survival. He turned to Mary. "Stay behind me. Do not move unless I tell you." She nodded, though fear threatened to paralyze her. The shouts drew closer, echoing against the stone walls. Torchlight flickered near the cave mouth. Mary's breath caught as she saw the silhouette of a man appear at the entrance, rifle raised. The Apache loosed an arrow before the intruder could step fully inside. The shaft struck true, and the man crumpled with a strangled cry. "Inside!" one of the hunters barked from outside. Gunfire cracked, bullets splintering the stone near Mary's head. She screamed, ducking low as dust showered from the cave wall. The Apache moved with deadly grace, releasing arrow after arrow, each one finding its mark. But the hunters were many, and their rifles gave them reach. The cave that had been sanctuary now became a trap. Mary pressed herself against the rock, her hands trembling. She wanted to run, to flee into the night, but instinct told her she would not last a minute without him. "Move," he commanded, grabbing her arm. He led her through a narrow side passage deeper into the cave. The hunters' voices roared behind them, their boots pounding as they gave chase. The passage twisted and turned, the darkness pressing close. Mary stumbled, her breath ragged, but the Apache never slowed. At last, they emerged into an open ledge, high above the canyon floor. The hunters burst out behind them, rifles raised. The Apache pushed Mary behind him. "Stay down," he barked. Gunfire erupted. He moved like a shadow, dodging, striking, each arrow loosed with precision. Mary could only watch in terror and awe as he fought with a ferocity that seemed almost otherworldly. 2 hunters fell. Then, a third, but more pressed forward, their shouts mingling with the thunder of their rifles. Mary's heart clenched as she saw blood streak across the Apache's arm. He staggered but did not falter. With a roar, he drove his knife into the chest of a man who had charged too close, sending him tumbling over the cliff's edge. For a moment, the world was chaos. Smoke, screams, the clash of steel and stone. Mary pressed her hands to her ears, praying it would end. And then, silence. The Apache stood, bloodied but unbroken, surrounded by the fallen. His chest rose and fell heavily, his bow still clenched in one hand. Mary crawled to him, her voice trembling. "You're hurt, let me help." He shook his head, his eyes scanning the horizon for any stragglers. "Not yet. More may come." But as she pressed her shawl against his wound, tears streaking her cheeks, she realized the truth. He had risked everything, not for gain, not for conquest, but to keep his promise. And now, with danger still looming, the bond between them was no longer one of bargain, but of blood and survival. Dawn broke with a pale gray light stretching across the canyon walls. Mary stirred awake, stiff from sleeping against the cold stone. For a moment, she thought she had dreamt it all, the chase, the hunters, the Apache's bargain. But the steady, Crackle of the dying fire and the warrior's silent figure crouched at the alcove's edge reminded her of the truth. He had not slept. Through the night, he had remained watchful, eyes scanning the cliffs and trails like a hawk circling prey. When she stirred, he glanced back briefly. "Eat," he said, tossing her a strip of dried meat from his pouch. Mary hesitated, but hunger gnawed at her. She nibbled cautiously, the taste strong and smoky. She whispered, "Thank you." The Apache did not respond. His gaze had fixed on something in the distance. Mary followed his eyes and her breath caught. Down below, faint but undeniable, riders traced the valley floor. Even from afar, she recognized the gleam of rifles and the swagger of men too sure of their kill. The hunters had not given up. "They're still coming," she said, her voice thin. The Apache's jaw tightened. "They know you run this way. They track like wolves, but wolves do not know Apache land." He rose to his full height, his movements sharp and decisive. He gestured for her to follow. "We go. Now." Mary scrambled to her feet, stumbling after him as he led her higher into the maze of canyons. The path was treacherous, littered with loose rocks and narrow ledges. More than once she nearly lost her footing, but his hand would appear, firm and steady, pulling her back from the brink without a word. Behind them, the hunters' shouts carried faintly, bouncing against stone walls. Gunfire cracked once, a warning shot into the air, as though to taunt her. Mary's chest tightened with fear. "They're close," she whispered. The Apache shook his head. "Too loud. They scare game, step heavy. Apache walk quiet." True to his word, he moved like a shadow, weaving through gullies, doubling back, along dry creek beds to confuse their trail. Mary tried to imitate him, though her skirts snagged and her boots slipped. Still, she pressed on, clinging to his guidance. Hours bled into the day. The sun climbed high, scorching the stone beneath their feet. Sweat streaked Mary's brow, her lips cracked from thirst. She wanted to collapse, but the Apache pressed forward relentlessly. Finally, when the hunters' voices faded, he halted at a ridge overlooking a vast canyon. From here, the land stretched endlessly, jagged cliffs, winding arroyos, and distant mesas shimmering in the heat. Mary dropped to her knees, exhausted. How can we keep running? They'll find us again." The Apache crouched beside her, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Hunters follow trail, but trail can be broken." He picked up a handful of sand, letting it slip through his fingers. "Land hides those who respect it." She looked at him, bewildered. "And if they catch us?" His gaze hardened, a glint of steel in his eyes. "Then they die." The starkness of his words chilled her, yet also gave her a strange sense of safety. Unlike the hunters, he did not boast or sneer. He simply spoke truth as certain as stone. As they rested briefly, Mary realized something. He was not merely hiding her. He was teaching her in his silent way how survival was more than flight. It was trust in the land, and in him. And though fear still gnawed at her, she began to believe they might outwit the wolves that hunted her. By late afternoon, the Apache guided Mary through a narrow cleft in the canyon wall. At first she thought it a dead end, but when he pressed his shoulder against a slab of rock, it shifted slightly, revealing a shadowed opening. Her eyes widened. "A cave?" He gave a short nod. "Sanctuary." Inside, the air was cool, damp, with the scent of stone and earth. The passage widened into a hidden chamber where faint shafts of sunlight filtered through cracks above. At the center lay a fire pit, its stones blackened by years of use. Small bundles of dried herbs hung from the walls, and the faint markings of painted symbols danced across the rock. Mary's breath caught. This was no mere shelter. It was a sacred place. The Apache knelt at the fire pit, arranging tinder with care. His movements carried a reverence she did not fully understand, as though each gesture honored unseen spirits. When the flames sparked to life, their glow filled the chamber with warmth. Mary sank to the ground, her body aching from the day's relentless march. The firelight painted shadows across her face, softening the fear that lingered in her eyes. For the first time since her flight began, she felt safe. The Apache handed her a water skin. She drank greedily, then whispered, "Thank you." This time his gaze lingered. "You keep promise?" he asked suddenly. She blinked, startled. "Promise?" His eyes bore into hers. "You speak truth of Apache, to your people." Mary hesitated. She remembered his demand the night before, but here, in this sacred place, it felt heavier. She nodded, slowly. "Yes, I gave my word. I'll keep it." Something in his expression softened, not quite a smile, but the shadow of approval. He turned back to the fire, feeding it carefully. Silence stretched between them, but it was no longer heavy with suspicion. Instead, it felt like an unspoken truce, a fragile bond forming in the heart of danger. Mary found herself studying him, the way the firelight caught in his hair, the strength in his arms, the scars etched across his skin. Each mark was a story, though she dared not ask. He was a man forged by battles she could only imagine. As night fell, the cave became a cocoon of warmth and shadow. Outside, the hunters still prowled, but here, their reach could not extend. Mary curled near the fire, her eyes growing heavy. For the first time, she allowed herself to breathe deeply, to rest without fear clawing at her chest. And in the quiet moments before sleep, she realized something startling. The Apache was no longer just her protector. He was her anchor in a world that had turned merciless. His sanctuary was not only of stone and flame, it was of trust, however fragile, and a promise that bound them together. The desert swallowed them in silence as the Apache guided Mary along a narrow trail that twisted between sheer cliffs. The moonlight cast silver shadows on the rock, painting the canyon walls like ghostly sentinels. Mary stumbled more than once, her skirts catching on brush and stone, but the warrior never slowed. His pace was steady, confident, as though the land itself bent to his memory. Finally, he stopped in the shadow of a towering bluff. He turned, his form cutting a dark figure against the pale glow of the night sky. Mary froze, her chest heaving with exhaustion, fear still clinging to her like a second skin. The Apache studied her, his eyes reflecting the faint light of the stars. "You run from hunters," he said, his voice deep and even. "They will not stop. They want you dead." Mary swallowed hard, nodding. "Yes, I know. I can't go back. If I return to town, I'll be killed." He crossed his arms over his chest, silent for a long moment. Then he said, "I will hide you." Her breath caught, her heart pounding in both relief and dread. You will?" He inclined his head, but his gaze was unyielding. "But one price must be paid." The words fell like stones in her chest. She had heard them earlier, but now spoken again in the hush of the night, they struck with heavier weight. Fear crept through her veins, twisting her thoughts. "What price?" she whispered, almost too afraid to know the answer. The Apache did not answer right away. His eyes flickered to the distance where faint glimmers of torchlight still dotted the horizon. The hunters were searching, though they had not yet found this hidden path. He turned back to her, his expression carved from stone. "You are a white woman," he said. "Your people bring guns, fences, lies. Apache bleed because of your kind." Mary flinched at the bitterness in his tone. She wanted to protest, to explain she was not like those men, but the words caught in her throat. "Why should I risk my life for you?" he continued, his voice rising slightly, though not in anger, more in challenge. "Tell me, why should I protect you from your own hunters?" Tears stung Mary's eyes. She wanted to say she didn't deserve this fate, that she was innocent, that she had no part in the cruelty his people had suffered. But the truth pressed on her chest. She was a settler. She had come west like so many others, blind to the cost her people's presence had wrought upon this land. I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "All I know is I don't want to die." The Apache's expression softened slightly, but his eyes remained sharp, searching her face for deceit. At last, he said, "If you want life, you give me truth, that is the price. Truth and promise." Mary blinked in confusion. She had expected demands of flesh or servitude, but his words were different, strange yet heavy with meaning. Promise? He stepped closer, his presence both intimidating and oddly grounding. You will speak truth of what you see, of Apache ways. To your people if you return, you will not speak lies, not call us savages, not call us thieves. You will tell our story. Mary stared at him, stunned. The request was nothing like what she had feared. He wanted honesty, respect, a bridge between their worlds. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "I swear it. I will." The Apache gave a single nod. "Then I will hide you." For the first time that night, Mary felt her chest ease, though uncertainty still swirled inside her. She did not fully understand this man, nor the true weight of the promise she had made. But in the harsh wilderness, where death prowled close, his offer was the only light left to her. The night deepened as the Apache led her further into the canyon. The air grew cooler, scented faintly with sage and smoke from distant fires. The silence between them pressed heavy, yet Mary dared not break it. She kept replaying his words, truth and promise, like a riddle she could not solve. Tambadiati. Last he guided her to a sheltered alcove beneath an overhanging rock. The small hollow was hidden from the trail, shadowed and safe from prying eyes. He gestured for her to sit, then crouched beside a bundle of dried brush. With practiced hands, he coaxed a small fire to life, its glow flickering against the stone walls. Mary sat stiffly, pulling her shawl tight around her shoulders. The warmth of the flames eased the chill in her bones, but her nerves remained taut. She studied the Apache quietly, trying to understand him. He was a man of silence. Every movement purposeful, every word measured. She could not imagine what life had shaped him into such a figure. Finally, she dared to speak. Why did you help me?" The Apache did not answer immediately. He stared into the fire, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "Because hunters are wolves. They take what they want. No honor, no law. They kill Apache, they kill white. All the same. They are poison." Mary shivered. She knew his words were true. She had seen the greed in those men's eyes, the delight they took in their chase. "But you said, a price," she whispered. "I still don't understand." His gaze lifted to hers, sharp and unwavering. "You will?" The cryptic reply sent a chill down her spine. She hugged her knees, torn between gratitude and fear. Every instinct urged her to flee, yet she knew the hunters lurked beyond the canyon walls. To step away from this man's protection was to walk into certain death. Silence stretched again, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Mary studied him, his strong jaw, his steady eyes, the scars that lined his arms like stories carved into flesh. He was not young, but not old either, perhaps in his 30s. A man hardened by war and survival, yet there was no cruelty in his gaze. Finally, she gathered courage. "If I keep my promise, will you let me go? Back to my world?" The Apache's eyes softened, though only slightly. "When it is safe." Her heart clenched at the uncertainty in his tone. How long would she remain here? Days? Weeks? Forever? The thought both terrified and strangely calmed her, for in his company at least she was alive. The fire crackled. Outside, the desert wind whispered through the rocks, carrying with it the distant howl of coyotes. Mary drew her shawl tighter and closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of home, of safety, of a bed that did not rock with fear. Then she thought of the promise she had made, to tell the truth of a people she had only just begun to glimpse. It felt like carrying a torch through darkness, fragile and heavy all at once. And as she drifted into uneasy sleep, she realized the price she had agreed to was not measured in coin or flesh, but in honor and truth. a currency she did not yet know if she could truly pay. The prairie wind howled as the last rays of sun bled into the horizon, staining the sky with streaks of crimson and gold. Mary Whitfield ran with every ounce of strength left in her legs, her lungs burning as though fire had filled them. Behind her, the pounding hooves of horses carried the voices of men, rough, eager, and merciless. They were bounty hunters hired by a cattle baron whose crime Mary had witnessed just days ago. A crime that had left 2 ranch hands dead in a ditch and her name cursed for knowing too much. The town marshal had offered no help. The baron's coin was too heavy in his pocket. Mary had been forced to flee, clutching only a canteen, a small satchel of food, and the will to survive. She knew these hunters, killers dressed as lawmen, would not let her live to tell the truth. The land was vast, merciless, and foreign. Sagebrush scraped her skirts. Her boots, once polished, were torn by rocks and thorns. Yet she pressed on, eyes wide with fear, praying for some miracle. Every ridge she crested, she half expected to see the glint of rifles. Every canyon whispered her name in echoes, as though mocking her plight. Her mind flickered back to home, to the quiet mornings on her father's farm in Kansas. She had never thought herself a woman of courage, only a woman of books, gentle words, and the warmth of hearth fires. Now she was prey in a deadly hunt cast into the wilderness where even the coyotes gave her wary glances. The hunters' voices carried on the wind. She can't have gone far. Track the prints, this desert won't hide her long. Mary stumbled into a dry wash, the sand shifting beneath her steps. Her heart thundered. She tried to steady her breathing, crouching low, but knew it was useless. She could not keep running forever. And yet surrender meant death. The shadows lengthened. Coyotes howled in the distance, their cries blending with the hoots of owls. Mary whispered a desperate prayer, her voice trembling. Lord, don't let them find me. Please, let someone, anyone, hear me. It was then she saw it, a flicker of movement in the rocks above her, a figure, tall and silent, painted by the fading light. For a heartbeat, she thought it was one of the hunters, and terror surged through her veins. But this man carried no rifle, no hat of a lawman. Instead, his dark hair flowed loose and his chest was bare beneath a leather vest. The feathers and beads woven into his braids glimmered faintly, his eyes, sharp as a hawk's, fixed on her with unreadable intensity. An Apache. Mary froze. The stories she had heard in town came rushing back, tales of raids, scalping, and merciless warriors. Her heart nearly stopped, yet there was no war cry, no arrow aimed at her, only silence. Behind her, the hunters' shouts drew closer. She turned in panic, torn between 2 dangers, men who sought her life and a stranger whose world was unknown. The Apache raised one hand, slow and deliberate, signaling her to stay still. Something in his stance held authority, as though the desert itself bent to his will. And for the first time in days, Mary felt a sliver of hope, though she dared not trust it. The hunters' voices echoed through the canyon, their torches beginning to glow as night tightened its grip. Mary stood trembling, pinned between 2 terrors, the pursuers on her trail and the lone Apache who watched from above. He descended the rocks with effortless grace, each movement deliberate, like a predator who had claimed his ground. In the firelight of the hunters behind her, Mary saw him clearly now. Tall, broad-shouldered, his skin bronzed by sun and years of battle against the harsh land. Around his neck hung a small talisman carved from bone. His eyes, dark as midnight, never wavered from hers. Mary's throat went dry. "Please, don't hurt me," she whispered, her voice trembling. The Apache did not answer immediately. He studied her as one might study a hawk tangled in a trap, dangerous if freed, pitiful if left to die. Then in accented but firm English he spoke. "White hunters follow you." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "They'll kill me if they find me. I have no place else to go." The Apache tilted his head, listening. From far below, the clatter of stones betrayed the hunter's climb. He glanced back at Mary, his gaze sharp and unreadable. "You in Apache land now," he said. "Hunters will not leave." They want blood. Her heart thudded painfully. She wanted to beg, to plead for mercy, but her tongue stuck to the roof of her mouth. This man owed her nothing. Perhaps he despised her already, simply for being a settler. "Trespassing on his people's sacred ground, please," she finally whispered. "Help me. I'll do anything." The Apache's eyes narrowed at that word. Anything. He stepped closer, the leather fringe of his leggings brushing against the sand. "You want life. I can hide you." He paused, letting his words sink like stones into still water. Then his voice dropped, steady and unyielding. "But one price must be paid." Mary stiffened, her heart hammering in her chest. Fear clamped down on her thoughts. She imagined the worst: slavery, possession, or demands her heart could not bear. Her hands clutched her skirt tightly, her knuckles white. What price?" she asked in a broken whisper. The Apache did not answer right away. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder at the hunter's lights, now dangerously close. His jaw tightened. "Not now," he said firmly. "Choose. Stay with me or die with them." It was not a question. It was a demand, sharp as the edge of a blade. Mary felt the weight of her decision crush her. Every fiber of her being screamed not to trust him. Yet she knew the hunters. Their cruelty was certain. The Apache, though fierce and enigmatic, had not raised a hand against her. She swallowed, hard, her voice trembling. "I'll stay with you." For the first time, something flickered across his face. Not warmth, not kindness, but perhaps the faintest recognition of courage. He gave a curt nod, then motioned sharply for her to follow. Mary obeyed, her legs quaking as she trailed him, into the shadows. Each step carried her deeper into a world she did not understand, where danger and salvation wore the same face. And as the hunters' torches flared behind them, Mary knew her life now rested in the hands of a man whose promise of safety came with a price she dared not yet imagine.